collection on food, and he'll be speaking today on gendered imagery in Canadian cookbooks. All of these speakers are working on versions of approaching the relationships between food and gender. Our second speaker is Wendy Mitchinson. She's currently the Canada Research Chair in History at the University of Waterloo. Her current project concerns obesity, and she'll be speaking on fighting fat in Canada today. Our final speaker is Scott Gillies, Curator at the Ingersoll Cheese and Agriculture Museum. He has a long, long pedigree in the dairy industry, and perhaps we know him best as our charming host from last meeting at this stage.
Thanks, Julia. Good morning. The image you see behind me is not an image I would use in my talk. The image that inspired my talk is that one, which you've seen earlier today. Michelle and I obviously have very good taste in funny images of men in cookbooks. But I wasn't sure that I wanted that image staring over my back as I spoke. I thought if there were photographs later, someone would say, why is he standing in front of a photo of himself? There's also a very unfortunate kind of big brother quality about that image, which might put you off your delicious 19th century snacks. So I'm just going to leave out a different image, which is based on, which I used in an article that appeared in the Ontario Library Association magazine, comparing French and image, that's a great comparison, French and English images of Canadian women, and that's one of my favorites. So I'll just leave that. We'll let her hang over my shoulder until I start showing you some pictures of cookbooks. My subject is representations of gender in Canadian cookbooks, as you know, and the time period I'm considering is roughly the first half of the 20th century. My subtitle is, Why is this man smiling? Let me put this in context for you. In the early 1960s, my mother taught me how to iron a shirt as part of my preparation for going away to university. My grandmother, who lived with us at the time, was horrified. Men were not meant to iron their own shirts, but to marry women who would cook their meals, iron their shirts, and much, much more. Given that background, it would be naive in me in looking into the cookbooks of that earlier period to expect to find men at the stove or women seated at the table. But I thought it might be fun to do a read-through of the words and pictures of some of the cookbooks to see more specifically what narratives are constructed by their makers. I want to talk first about community cookbooks, those created by women's committees for their local churches, hospitals, and the like. Such books were produced in order to raise money, so they seldom feature engaging and therefore costly pictures, but they do tell some very interesting stories in prose and verse. Afterward, I'll take a little stroll through the visual imagery of commercial cookbooks and see if the stories they tell are the same. So, women in community cookbooks. I've written elsewhere about a hugely popular metaphorical recipe called How to Cook a Husband, which shows women exactly how to acquire and manage a husband and turn him into something both nourishing and useful. I should tell you it's a pretty long recipe. But community cookbooks have many other lessons for women, and especially for women in their roles as wives and mothers. Let me share a few of my favorites and talk a bit about the implicit narratives that they convey. The first thing to observe is that in the community cookbook, women are almost always seen in relation to their families. The cookbook's purpose is above all to help its owner please her husband and nourish her children. I might sum up the whole talk in one title. The book was published in 1928 in St. Vital, Manitoba by the ladies of St. Mark's Church and Regent Park United. It's called, I am not making this up, Wise Wives Keep Husbands Happy by Using This Good Guide to Wholesome Cookery. I have a copy here if anybody needs it. Thank you. Because the majority... Hello, everyone. Very great, right? I'm a little late. Because the majority of these books are published by church groups, it's not surprising that they display a good deal of conventional piety. Most of the passages I'll quote appear in slightly different forms in many different cookbooks. This first one is a fairly common one, and I've taken the version from a book entitled Favorite Recipes from Godrich, published by the Women's Hospital Auxiliary around 1940. It's called Lord of All Pots and Pans. Lord of all pots and pans and things, since I've no time to be a saint by doing lovely things, or watching late with thee, or dreaming in the dawnlight, or storming heaven's gates, make me a saint by getting meals and washing up the plates. Although I must have Martha's hands, I have a merry mind, and when I black the boots and shoes, thy sandals, Lord, I find. I think of how they trod the earth, what time I scrubbed the floor. Accept this meditation, Lord. I haven't time for more. Warm all the kitchen with thy love, and light us with thy peace. Forgive me all my worrying, and make all grumbling cease. Thou who didst love to give men food in room or by the sea, accept this service that I do it unto thee. You'll have noticed the absence in this little rhyme of a husband and children. The speaker's relationship is entirely with God, though the reader surely infers that the meals she makes are consumed by corporeal beings. A literal family is also conjured up by the floor she scrubs, the plates she cleans, and the boots she blackens. But the work of the home is not performed to please a man, at least not a mortal one. What leavens this piece and those like it is a sly sense of humor. The speaker alludes to her busyness with mundane things in such a way as to sharpen the contrast with the peace and contemplation she seeks. There's also a lovely directness here, which gives some of the speaker's utterance a bit of an edge, as when she says, "Accept this meditation, Lord, I haven't time for more." But if serving God by doing the dishes represents one of the major themes of the cookbook narratives, there are parallel secular versions which emphasize not the heavenly kingdom, but an earthly one, in which the housewife apparently is not God's servant, but the queen of her own realm. This is from the Saskatchewan Co-op Cookbook, 1953. It's called Little Kitchen. Little kitchen, you're my throne, for 'tis here and here alone that my rule is held supreme, and I rule a royal queen. Here I come, and day by day toil the precious hours away, singing blithely while I make fleecy biscuits, pies, and cake. Little kitchen, would you hear why this cooking art is dear? Then the secret I'll impart. 'Tis the way to hubby's heart. In the opening 4 lines, again, I've got a copy of any of these. In the opening 4 lines, there's the lovely, if far-fetched notion that the woman is queen in her kitchen. But she is a queen without subjects. The words queen and throne are purely nominal here. It's clear that in reality she is a worker, a servant, albeit one who is blithely happy, and her day is spent, in her own words, in, quote, toiling the precious hours away. It seems that pleasing God has been replaced by pleasing hubby. Her happiness arises because of her ability to make herself loved by her husband. If there's a single proverb that powers the secular narrative in these books, it's that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. That's an interesting proposition. In my limited experience of romance novels, I wouldn't have thought that it's one that finds a lot of support. If popular songs are in contemporary narratives of romantic love, I am unable to dredge up very many in which a woman cooks her way into a man's heart. Songs like Black Coffee or A Taste of Honey do not dwell on preparation techniques. And when Bessie Smith in the 1930s sang, "I need a little sugar in my bowl, I need a little hot dog on my roll," I don't think the kitchen was the room she had in mind. Nonetheless, it is the basis of a narrative of long standing, and it reflects the reality that in most ages of history, economics dictated that a woman needed a man to stick around after the courtship, and the pleasures of the table are notable for their longevity. I've already mentioned that there can be humor and lightness of tone in even the most reverential of these pieces. In some examples, it is humor that dominates. One of my favorites is from How to Bake a Cake, which I took from a Sarnia cookbook, the Divine Street United Church cookbook, 1950s. And it's a bit of a long one, so bear with me. How to bake a cake. Light oven, grease pan, Crack nuts. Get out bowl, spoons, ingredients. Remove 18 blocks and 7 toy automobiles from kitchen table. Measure 2 cups of flour and a piece of wax paper. Get sifter from cabinet. Remove Johnny's hands from flour. Wash flour off him. Measure out 1 more cup to replace what is now on the floor. Put flour, 2½ teaspoons baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon salt in sifter. Get dustpan and brush out pieces of bowl which Johnny has accidentally knocked off the table. Get another bowl. Sift ingredients. With spoon, work 1/2 cup shortening against side of bowl. Answer doorbell. Return to kitchen. Remove Johnny's hands from bowl. Wash shortening and sugar off him. Get out egg. Answer doorbell. Return to kitchen. Mop up floor. Change Johnny's shoes, which are eggy. Get another cup. Get another egg. Beat. Remove toy automobile from bowl. Add flour mixture alternately with egg, 3/4 cup milk, and 1 teaspoon vanilla. Answer knock at the back door. Remove Johnny's hands from bowl. Return to kitchen and wash shortening, sugar, flour, milk, and vanilla off him. Beat. Mixture. Answer telephone. Return to kitchen and remove Johnny's hands from bowl. Wash shortening, etc., etc., etc. off him. Take up greased pan and find it has 1/4 inch nutshells in it. Head for Johnny, who flees, knocking bowl off table. Wash floor. Wash kitchen table. Wash kitchen walls. Wash dishes. Call baker. Lie down. Lie down is all that happens. What seems to be especially noteworthy here is that in many ways this is the same reality enshrined in the more reverential pieces. The woman has to cook and keep house and raise children. The huge difference is in the tone. Here the housewife world is seen through a glass darkly. This kitchen is nobody's throne, but something closer to bedroom. Serenity has been replaced by panic, achievement by surrender. The ending, call baker, lie down, seems to give the tiniest hint of the looming shift from Betty Crocker to Betty Friedan. And before we leave it, here's a very brief piece that captures much of the same spirit of housewifely frustration rather than fulfillment from St. Matthew's Lutheran Church in Kitchener, Our Favorite Recipes, 1940. It's called O Weary Mothers. Oh, weary mother, mixing dough, don't you wish that food would grow? Your lips would smile, I know, to see a cookie bush or a donut tree. We make a big shift when we move from text to image, and almost as big a shift when we move from community cookbooks to commercial ones. I'll be looking primarily at the cookbooks published by manufacturers to promote the use of their products, almost all of which are foodstuffs, flour, cocoa, baking powder, and the like. I'll take you through a dozen or so of these, or as many as we have time for. I've tried to come at this in a way that is systematic without pretending to be scientific. The sample I used was my own collection of several hundred cookbooks and pamphlets put out by food producers. And I tried to find representative images, not images chosen to build an argument. That means we'll start with the most common cover image, that of a woman alone, usually a young woman, and usually in the act of preparing food. This is a bit of a switch from the community cookbooks, where women appear far more often within the context of their families. Oh, there he is again. Have you had enough? First up is a splendid image, almost 100 years old now, created for the Cow and Cocoa Company of Toronto. The cow and cover girl seems to me to radiate innocence, sweetness, and youth. She is modestly but attractively dressed and is evidently working skillfully in the kitchen. She plainly knows what she's doing because she has no cookbook. This is frequently the case unless the woman is shown using the cookbook with her own picture on it. This presumably is the Cow and Company's guess about how their potential purchasers see themselves. No message here about piety or service. Not surprisingly, the only non-generic item on the counter is the tin of Cowan's cocoa. The narrative would run something like this. You are young, attractive, and a good cook who knows enough to use our product. Is that a wedding ring on the left hand? I can't tell, which is perhaps as it's meant to be. I am also technically challenged. There we go. The second image comes from Western Canada flour mills, perhaps in the 20s or 30s. Like the Cowan's girl, this is a portrait in sweetness, youth, and competence. But I'm above all drawn by the text. There is nothing subliminal in this seduction. Baking produces happiness. The third image of a single woman comes from the Magic Baking Powder people, who produced a wonderful variety of cookbooks and images over the years. I love the simplicity of design here as well as the narrative. The baking has already been done. This is the moment of presentation, but the face here, with its rather noticeable rouge and lipstick, is far more glamorous than its predecessors. Its date, by the way, is about 1935. There's cleverness, of course, in using presto as the phrase for the magical baking powder, but the attitude of the head, the uplift of the eyes, the appearance only of the woman's flesh and not of her housewifely garb, suggests to me, forgive me, I am male, a kind of seduction. If the cook herself is not quite doing a striptease for her husband, that lifting of the veil over her tea biscuits is a suitably wholesome stand-in for it. This, I would argue, is an advertiser's version of the notion that the way to a man's heart, or perhaps in this case his libido, is through his stomach. In this final image in this series, the woman is perhaps a bit older than the first three, and I'm inclined to see